Hello everybody! After some additional time with Destiny, it's time to return with my final thoughts on the game, or at least my thoughts on how the end game currently stands within the game, because with, expansions or whatever, stuff will change. So as it currently stands, these are going to be my thoughts on what I think about the game. Overall, I stand by what I said in my first video, which is that the game is really fun to play. The shooting is solid, and the general gameplay, the moment-to-moment gameplay is really, really fun and works well. That said, I think the end game suffers from some really annoying problems that people, pointed out when the game came out on console, and they still stand on PC. Although now we are closer to the launch of a, DLC pack, an expansion pack, which means that overall, things may change here in the future, but as it currently stands, Destiny 2 suffers from a lack of endgame content. And I'm not necessarily referring to the volume of activities available, even though that is a big problem and the volume of things that you can do is quite low. I'm more referring to the variety of things that you can do at end game. So let's kind of take a trip through how this all works, and maybe you'll get an idea of what I'm talking about here. First things first, you hit level 20, and then suddenly your main focus is not leveling, it is increasing your power level on your character by getting different items. That increases based on the average item level of all of your stuff. If you've played WoW recently, you know this kind of system. Imagine you had all level 200 stuff on your guy. Your average level is going to be around 200, right? Depending on some of the other items you have. That's kind of how this works. So if you were, a fresh level 20, your level, your power level is going to be quite low in comparison. But, I'm upwards in the 280s right now. And the gear I'm getting, if I went and did a really difficult piece of content, the gear I'm getting is generally relative to my level of items that I have. So if I'm, say, 280, the stuff I'm going to be getting is around 275 to 285 on average. There's stuff that could be a little bit higher and a little bit lower, but one item that I get, let's say it's a very powerful weapon that I get, it's not locked at a specific level, right? The thing can be in the range of what I am, which is 275 to 285, assuming I'm 280. That means that if you're 220 and you're doing the exact same content that I just did, the item level range that you're going to be getting is 215 to 225. This is a generalization. This isn't a hard, fast rule, but this is generally how the system works. And it is rather frustrating because if I'm doing difficult content, I expect to be getting equal or greater than rewards to that content, but you're not. You're getting it based on the relativity of your item level. This has essentially two effects of it, which is that the first one, which is the good one, is that no matter what content you're doing, you're going to be getting relevant gear, or at least close to relevant gear. But it also means that no matter what content you're doing, you're going to be getting close to relevant gear. You're not going to be able to go do something that you exceed in skill, right? Like I have a skill that is greater than this level of content, and I can do it successfully. However, I'm not going to be rewarded for being able to do it. I'm going to be getting relevant stuff for my level. So there's good and there's bad, drawbacks to this whole thing. I think generally I don't like the system in its current implementation. It could be refined a bit, as in maybe if you went and did the Nightfall, which is so imagine a strike is a dungeon, a Nightfall is like a more difficult version of that, a dungeon, not that dungeon in particular, but that I'll get to the Nightfall in a minute when I talk about the variety of things that you have to do. But let's just say, you went and did the Nightfall, which is very difficult to do. It's still only going to give you gear relevant to what you currently have. So even if you could do it at a low, level of power on your character, you're not going to suddenly get like a very, very, very good item out of it that is going to hyper boost you up and be able to give you more relevant items. And at this system's core, it relies on that being a problem, in fact, because if you think about it, you have, let's say you have 275 as an average, or let's just go back to my 280. You have 280 as an average, and you go and do, go do anything that's kind of difficult, and let's say you get a 285 item, your average item level is going to go up a bit. So imagine you go to 281, but that just slightly increases the range of items you're getting. It doesn't necessarily guarantee that you're now going to get a 290 item, right? It just means that everything else you're going to get is like going to be 276 and 281, that kind of stuff. And there is more complications to the system. I'm generalizing and simplifying how it actually works for descriptive purposes, but I think you get the idea. It is a little frustrating that you don't necessarily get big, massive upgrades a lot of the time. You're getting all these like small incremental upgrades, which leads to gameplay that I believe is not necessarily good. Because imagine now that you know this system, and this is the case in everybody I've talked to who has leveled a second character, is you now know the system, which means when you level your second character, you're prepared for this. Now you're no longer going and doing those quests that get you these crazy exotic weapons, because you need to save those quests in order to get a better version of that exotic weapon, right? Now, what you end up doing is you go and you just grind out. You're doing public events. You're doing anything that can get you relevant level gear to which you're currently at, just to get your average item level up to roughly the soft cap, which is about 260. And then you're going to, once you reach around 260, 270, maybe even 280, if you're really feeling grindy about it, then you go and do these missions that are going to get you exotic weapons that are like, 290. And you purposefully like hold back on doing content because you just want a higher item level of stuff. And that's not necessarily a good gameplay thing. It sucks that you have to kind of make that decision to grind out before you go and do this stuff. I think it would be a bit better if it just rewarded you with an item that is at a set power level. Maybe it is 240 or whatever, because they have a system in the game where you can upgrade those items. So essentially what you can do is say I have a 280 weapon, but I got a 285 weapon, and it's not an exotic weapon, so I don't really want to, I don't want to trade it out for this awesome weapon that I have. Or maybe it's just a like a good feeling weapon with like a well done sight on it and everything. You kind of want to use those weapons that you feel better at. So you're like, okay, I want to use this hand cannon, or I want to use this scout rifle, but I just got a scout rifle that is slightly higher level, but it's not really gonna, I don't like the sight on it or whatever. Maybe it's on an exotic one. You can actually take that item as long as it's of the same kind. So scout rifle to scout rifle, or hand cannon to hand cannon. And you can absorb that higher level item into the other one, bringing it up to that item level of the one that you destroyed, essentially. It costs some resources to be able to do that, but it means that you have this cyclical system that as long as you are getting minor upgrades on things, you can make those items better. Same thing goes for like chest pieces or helmets or anything like that. And it is kind of convenient because it means that, let's say you get an exotic item that is not necessarily as high level as it should be, you can then upgrade it as long as you get an item that is slightly higher item level than it. And that system works pretty good in its current iteration. I just wish that they maybe would take the reins off a bit, or the chains off of it a little bit, and be like, okay, you get these exotic items at a specific light level of that item. Then in that case, let's take that idea and be like, how about if we understood that, okay, now let's just give you items that are higher level than that, and you just absorb them into this cool item that you have. I think that would work really well, and it would prove that you don't necessarily need to get these like range of rewards that you're constantly getting, and it would still give you, I guess what would end up happening is the downside to that is you wouldn't feel like you're getting like a really good upgrade, like, oh yes, this item's awesome, because you'd be like, oh yes, this item's awesome because I'm going to put it into this other item I have. And that doesn't necessarily feel good as a player either. So at the end of the day, you're just kind of, it's a difficult situation either way based on how they've set up their loot to work. And I understand it. I'm not over here just like getting all grumpy about it. I understand why they've made the decisions they have. It's just unfortunate because it turns the end game into this weird treadmill that I believe is trying to cover for something. So let's talk about the actual content that you have. But this goes back to what I said earlier, which is I don't think the volume of things you get to do is very, huge. And I don't think the variety of things that you get to do is very good. So, for example, at the current end game, you have several things you can do. You have these, you have challenges on planets, so such as like killing specific amounts of certain enemies or going and doing patrols, which is essentially going and killing more enemies. And then you get to go and do public events, but you can trigger heroic public events by doing specific things in a event. So such as like the one with the tank. You guys have probably, if you've been playing Destiny, you've probably seen it. The tank comes down, starts shooting at you, and then it drops these orbs, and you use the orbs to plant them in these like shield generators, which then remove the shield around these cool weapons that you then get to use to kill the tank. Well, if you remove all of the shields from the 3 different things that are protecting the rocket launchers, it then triggers a heroic version of that event, and another tank comes down, and then you get better rewards from it, essentially. That's the idea. You trigger a heroic event, you get better rewards. It's kind of this, it's a nice little system. I really do enjoy that. But, you have those that you're doing. You have the heroic events, or public events in general. Then if you haven't done them, you have the lost sectors, which reward. It's just a chest at the end. There's nothing special about it. You just go down, you fight a boss, and then and it's not even a difficult boss. You can usually kill it in a couple hits depending on what class you're playing. You kill him, you go and loot the chest, and then there's that. You're not going to get necessarily, or you have a small chance of getting something good out of it, but it's very low, so it's not really worth farming that out. And then you have the adventures, which are essentially kind of more or less the same thing as Lost Sectors, except sometimes, there's some variety in gameplay there. So you have that stuff. You have the world stuff that you're doing. On top of that, you can go and buy these maps from Cade, which will lead you to these chests, which could give you some good stuff out of them, which is nice. And finally, so that's all the planet stuff that you get to do. The final thing that you can go do is go and do strikes, which are like small little dungeons. There's not very many of them at all. So kind of depending on how much you want to replay those, that's up to you. And then finally, there's the Nightfall. I'm excluding the raid at the moment. I'll talk about that in a minute. But finally, there's the Nightfall. And the Nightfall is essentially a dungeon. And I said that correctly. It is a dungeon. It doesn't change. It's the same thing. It's the same things that you're doing in the dungeon with the same boss at the end and the same everything. But what does change is there are modifiers on said dungeon. So say, the first week, our powers and abilities were coming back really, really quickly. So you're throwing grenades everywhere, and you're throwing all of your supers out, and it's really fun, and you're getting you powered up very, very quickly. It's fun to run through, and you have 15 minutes to complete it. Then, last week you had 10 minutes to complete it, and every enemy you killed added a couple seconds to the timer. So you're just constantly trying to build up your timer. But on top of that, you had this revolving damage boost. So 1 second it would be solar damage, and then a minute later it will change to void damage, and then it would change to arc damage, and you're getting massive damage boosts based on that. So you're being able to kind of time up your abilities, and based on your subclass, you're kind of timing that up with how you're killing the boss, and that's really fun. And then this week there's little rings that you can jump through to extend your time, for example. So you're getting the idea that it is one singular dungeon that you will get to know intimately, but there are variety things to it and different ways to go about it. If you've been playing WoW recently, you can kind of think of this as the Mythic Plus system, except Mythic Plus is done way better because it is essentially, imagine if you took the strikes instead of this Nightfall, and then every week, different combinations of abilities would be in there, and you kind of have to deal with those. And that's really fun and cool, but essentially at the end of the day, the way it's working in Destiny right now is you have one Nightfall that you're doing it in, and that can get kind of repetitive. It's nice that you can come up with a system, and you can come up with a system for each of the different modifiers, but I wish that you could do that for every strike and not just this one Nightfall. And then if you look at the Leviathan raid that came out, it has a lot of really cool mechanics in it. It is apparently really fun, and people really like it. I have not done it myself, because I feel like it's just not it's not necessarily like I want to go and do it. I want to go and do the end game content and see it, but at this point, I'm kind of running on this treadmill with Destiny that I've already done it too often. It's only been the second week and I'm already like, okay, I see how the end game rolls. You jump in and you do kind of your weekly reward stuff to try and get an item that is higher level so you can boost your level of your items that you currently have. And then you go and do the Nightfall. And then you're kind of done for the week. And if you want to do the raid, you go and do the raid. But at the end of the day, it just kind of feels like there isn't a whole lot to do. You can kind of get everything done within a day. And that's not necessarily that fun. I don't have a reason to come back on Wednesday and Thursday and Friday and keep playing the game outside of just playing the game. But is that a bad thing? That is the question. I'm going to throw a curveball at you because I've been kind of ragging on the end game, saying it's not that good, it's kind of repetitive. But is that a bad thing? Because in a world where there are so many other games to play, you know, say if you're playing an MMO like WoW or SWTOR or any other MMO. Imagine you're just playing any other MMO out there, Guild Wars 2 even, and then you suddenly pick up Destiny and you're like, oh, this is really fun. I kind of like this. It feels like an MMO. And then you get to the end game and you're like, but there's not a lot to do. Is that a bad thing? Because you could potentially have a game that you log into once a week, maybe twice a week, depending on if you're doing like the raid with a ton of friends. And then you're kind of done. You don't really have to get back on and do anything. In fact, you don't have to get on at all. You could just get on whenever you kind of want to and do some stuff. I don't think that's a bad thing. And I think there is a market for a game like that. Whether or not Destiny is intentionally trying to do that is another thing entirely. But where it currently settles in the grand scheme of all of the games out there is a really nice spot that you can just log into a game, enjoy it maybe once or twice a week. If that, you don't even have to do that. And when a new content pack comes out, you go and do that and you have some fun with it. You play with some friends and then you leave the game again. And you come back every now and again. I like that because that is what Destiny is to me. Because I have so many other things going on. I've got multiple jobs that I'm working on. I'm a very busy guy. I'm typically busy at night and I'm busy during the day and I'm making videos and I've got a lot on my plate right now. And I'm really enjoying, you know, being busy for sure. But I also like the fact that I can just have a game that isn't constantly demanding my attention and I can jump into it and enjoy it for maybe an hour or two once a week and then move on with my life. And I don't feel the need to have to do that. You know, in WoW right now, I feel the need to have to jump on and do my world quest, even though I know I don't need to. And with a new expansion coming out, I feel less of a need to do that. But at the same time, that's just kind of how I feel. I feel like I need to get on and do that kind of stuff. And it's not that I need to, it's that I also kind of want to because it is a lot of fun to do. I don't feel that need with Destiny. And I feel like it fits a very good niche for me as a game that I can kind of come back to and have some fun with and then leave. And then maybe in a couple months' time, come back to and have some fun with and leave. And I had this experience with The Division. I put a lot more time into The Division than I think I'm going to put into Destiny. But it was one of those games where, you know, new stuff came out. Oh, okay, let's go and do it. Let's have some fun for a while. Okay, I'm done with it. And then I leave. And I think that there is a market for those kind of games. So while I think that Destiny's end game is very thin, there isn't a lot to it, that doesn't mean that it isn't fun. And that it isn't enjoyable. And I like the way it is now, but with that as a caveat, you may not, because you may be looking for something that you can actually kind of absorb and really get into. I don't think Destiny is that game, at least for me, and I really enjoy just kind of hopping in every week and getting in there. But those are my thoughts on how Destiny 2 has kind of panned out now that I've gotten to the end game and I've played it out a bit. I am excited to see what this new content pack is coming that they've put a trailer out for and everything. I'm kind of curious what you guys think about it. How are you feeling about the Destiny 2 end game? Are you still playing it? Do you feel like you're kind of done with it and you're going to come back with the expansion pack? Or maybe you're not going to come back at all. I'm really curious of how it has played out for you guys. But with all of that being said, I'm not going to go back and play Destiny, at least not right now. I've kind of done my thing for the week, and now I'm going to go do other things, and I kind of like that that's an option. But I will see you guys next time.